Hello, my name is Emmy DeGrappa. Each week, we bring you stories asking our guests the question why. We learn about passion, purpose, and the human experience. Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with the generous support of the Wyoming Community Foundation. This is What's Your Why? All right. Welcome, Alfreda. I'm so excited to talk to you. I've looked at your website. I read your bio. I have so many questions for you. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to introduce you. So today we're talking to Alfreda Bertrack Algeo. She is an enrolled citizen of the Ostet Sakowin Cool Wicasa Band, Lower Brule, South Dakota, where she was born and raised. And she is an author, an illustrator, and she utilizes her oral traditions and cultural wisdom to create children's picture books and teen novels. And I just want to say welcome, Alfreda.
Wopila Tonka. Thank you for having me.
So, Alfreda, I want to start with your background because I think it is so interesting. Tell me about your tribe, the Cool Wicasa Band.
Okay. Again, I'm from the Ocheki Shakowi, Kui Chasha Oyate, and it's located in central South Dakota. It is the Lower Brule Lakota band of the Lakota Nation. And that was where I was born and raised.
So it sounds like you learned your native language.
I must say that I speak enough, but not enough to be fluent. And I'm working on that. Come a long ways. But, I do want to mention that a lot of our people, as you've probably heard before, with our Native people, they're products of the boarding school era, where their basic survival as Native students depended on how much English they spoke and how little Lakota they spoke. So today, it's so exciting. Today, we're seeing a pride and resurgence in our Native languages and traditions. And it has become a co-requisite in many of our tribal schools and colleges and universities. So I think that's exciting.
That is exciting. And just for the young people to learn their language is very exciting. I'm really happy to hear that.
And, I grew up on the reservation, like I mentioned. So my childhood I was immersed in creativity everywhere.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to ask you about your journey and your inspiration and when you started to draw and do illustrations.
Like I said, I can't ever remember not being creative, but I believe it comes from being immersed in art in one form or another. Everybody around me did something: beadwork, leatherwork, painting, drawing, dancing. And everyone worked hard. And during the late 50s, my parents and, of course, the whole community actually hauled our drinking water from the Missouri River. And we used kerosene lamps and heated with wood. We didn't have electricity. And so our winters were pretty dark and long. And it was hard on us children, but we had to invent ways to be creative. And I think my first project I can remember was making paper dolls out of cardboard. It must have been pretty successful because I remember trading for pencils and other things I wanted. Yeah, so creativity was just a norm growing up.
Well, when did you leave the reservation and what was your desire to become educated in writing books and being an illustrator and going on beyond living on the reservation? But how did you think about that when you became an author and illustrator?
I think I was kind of influenced by a change that happened on my reservation as a result of the Pick-Sloan Act in 1958, 1962. By the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The project aimed to build all these earthen dams, of course, to reduce flooding and create electricity and so on and so forth. Well, it forced our community to relocate. And for me, the audacity was that our tribal leaders, including my parents, who they both served on a tribal council. My mother was a chief tribal judge. And our tribal leaders were not invited or involved to that planning process. So as a result of being ill-advised and unprepared, we had a little difficulty, at least with my family, relocating. And we lost thousands of acres of our land base and medicinal plants and animals. And we moved out in the country. My father basically bought cattle and horses and moved out to a ranch not too far from the agency, the new agency hub. And it was during that era, I think, that I really started reading everything I could. And my mother had joined a book club and she loved to read. And we would get the most popular books each month. And I remember the first book I received and read was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And the story kind of captivated me. It started my love affair with books. And I've always, did art. So I started illustrating and kind of writing my books. And I think this is also when I decided I wanted to be a writer as well as an artist.
And when you wrote your first book, so your first book was called The Day the Earth Rose Up, correct?
Right.
And what was the inspiration for that book? Because I thought that was really fascinating.
Well, The Day the Earth Rose Up, I'm thrilled that it's been selected to represent Wyoming this year at the National Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. in August. And I've always been fascinated with Pleiades and the stars. And I heard various tribal depictions from my culture and other cultures. And I've always loved education, and I've read a lot. And so I was impressed that they were the first stars mentioned in literature. And so it was always like in the back of my mind there that someday I wanted to write about, my version of the Pleiades. Well, one morning I was out before dawn about 2 years ago in the winter, and I usually make my morning prayers. I get up early. I had a cup of water and I was outside in the backyard praying. Yeah, I looked up and at Pleiades, it was so magical. It was like they just dropped down right in my eyes, and it just felt different. And that night I had a dream about Pleiades in Tipila, the Lodge of the Bears, which is Devil's Tower. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do this. This is something I've always wanted to do. So I sat down and I merged my lived experiences, my dreams and oral traditions and all of that together. And I came up with The Day the Earth Rose Up.
Tell me a little bit about that story, because
Okay, sure.
It's like a legend. So go ahead and tell me.
Yeah, it is. Yes. Well, when seven sisters venture deep into the forest to gather chokecherries, they are surprised and chased by a giant bear. As they huddle together on a rock ledge and pray for help, the earth rises, taking them out of the reach of the bear, and a giant eagle comes to their rescue. And the seven sisters are taken to the Star Nation, where they become the Pleiades, the star formation that we see in the night sky. So basically, the story just inspires, I guess, readers to always believe that everything's possible, and you are never alone, and the Great Spirit's always there with you. So that's the gist of the book.
So what was your inspiration? So that book, after that, was it Father Eagle and the Hunter and then Cottonwood Sings?
Yeah, they're all basically stories I grew up with and stories I've heard with other tribes. And, winter, for me, growing up, winter was always a time for oral stories or oral traditions. And I've been immersed, and I love them. And they're basically the stories that are told to us, handed down through the generations. And they explain our creation, of course, as Lakota people, our connection to the supernatural, natural worlds, and the rules and laws that we should follow as society. And so those stories have also, in my view, have as much, if not more, sometimes validity as the written word. So I really have always kept these stories, in my heart. And now that I have the time to write, I am finished with my career. I have the time to write. I'm writing these stories I remember and I've heard and I dream. So yeah, I just finished a manuscript, another one that I need to send off soon. So I'm enjoying it.
I noticed on your website that you have a gallery. Is that correct?
I do. It's seasonal.
Okay. And what's in your gallery?
Well, it's in a changing mode right now. I'm actually turning it into more of a bookshop where I can also showcase other Native authors and artists, because I really see that as Native writers, we hold a key, like a doorkeeper for the caliber of Native American literature available to our youth, Native youth. So I'm really doing my part to encourage other writers and artists. So that's my intent for my books, my bookshop.
Oh, okay. So it's making a change right now because,
Yes.
okay. And you felt like that was an important part of making that transition from being an illustrator to actually having a bookshop where you can host other authors who are Native American.
Well, sort of. Let me back up. I also have my own art there. I'm an artist. I have lots of work here. I paint all the time. I switch modes. Sometimes I paint in the morning, I illustrate, or I'll do sculpture, and then I'll write. So I'm switching back and forth. It's, I'm multifaceted and I love it.
How do you inspire youth? It says that you inspire youth of all ages to comprehend and explore their inner strength and love and appreciate who they are. How do you do that? Do you go to schools? How do you meet young people? How do you inspire them?
I do, and I don't do enough. I would like to do more, and maybe that'll change in the future. But I really like to share stories to them that will teach and transform their mindset, basically, because especially now with the Native with the book bans going on, which a lot of our Native books are being taken off the market. So I bring the core values of connecting and respecting the natural world into the books, and I also use my stories as valuable tools, teaching them that they're the tools that they can use embedded in the stories today, and they can build self-esteem. And they're everything that basically that they want, they can find in books. Native authors are coming out in their writing, and our culture is being shared more and more. And so I go into the schools. I used to go in a lot more, but with the media now, things are changing where we have easier access to the schools, libraries.
So you mentioned that they're banning books. Tell me a little bit more about that. That's interesting.
Well, you see it everywhere. At least I do. Being a Native author, it comes up in a lot of my conversations with other people. And I really believe that books can help children develop empathy for others and help them imagine different experiences and lives outside of their own. And they also show different people and life situations beyond the child's worldview, especially with our Native children. Sometimes they're underrepresented in the bigger picture. And so my theory is when you take these books away from the children, it gives them a narrow and limited understanding of the different cultures and, of course, worldviews, and so on and so forth. And so Native books are being banned as well. And just recently, I believe it's by the Green Bay Press, the newspaper there in Wisconsin, that they mentioned that apparently the stories of the atrocities committed against Native people by the European colonizers are instilling some white guilt. And so that is their summary of why some of the books are being pulled out. But I know just last year, the Central New York school district in Pennsylvania banned Bride Bread, a Native American story by Kevin Mellert, The People Shall Continue by Simon Ortiz. And so that's just a few of many. And so myself, how I think I'm getting involved is I'm looking at books, I'm looking at common themes and patterns so that I can get a better understanding of why people are being denied free access to information and books. And because, the dark parts of our history, even with our Native American history, need to be taught, not hidden, because it's only through the truth that we can guard against repeating that history. And of course, I'm a big promoter of education. And my dissertation I did was with youth. So I try to do my part in making sure they get as much information as they can to make their decisions, for their own futures.
So how do you use your stories as education so that there is cultural understanding, that there is building a bridge, so to speak? So yes, there is a harmful past. And how do you build a bridge to a brighter future?
For me, it's about truth. Because I remember as a child listening to stories that misrepresented my culture. And there was a book, These Were the Sioux by Mary Sandoz, a non-native from Nebraska. And I remember disagreeing or just asking, about that story. And I was punished for speaking up. And I see that this is still taking place in our schools. And our Native students are having difficulty envisioning their place in the stories they are reading, hearing, watching films, movies. And so just the act of a Native author, a Native artist, a Native filmmaker, our producer, director, coming in and a teacher and engaging with the student is positive because they see somebody that looks like them. And it gives them a sense of pride. It gives them a sense of placement. And so just to me, just the act of going in or reading my book or having my books out there where they could pick it up and see what I'm doing in itself, I hope is inspiring. And plus, letting them know as Native writers, authors, and them as students, as children, as people, have intimate knowledge of, through their grandparents and through the books, and to not be afraid to ask and learn the culture, the language, and all of that. So that to me, that's what I'm trying to instill.
Do you think that Native Americans have a new voice?
Absolutely. They do have a new voice now. And we are not only seeing more Native writers and artists in the creative process of storytelling, but we are seeing more producers and directors also controlling Native images and true histories in film and media. So we're on our way.
It sounds like you've been a big part of that, just in your own experience and the work that you've done to move that forward. What do you hope to see in the future?
My takeaway, I guess, from my why of all the things that I do, first of all, I would like to see more Native youth to go as far as they can with their dreams and on this educational ladder without leaving behind their traditional ways. It's possible to bridge that. And I would also like to see more stories out there, because more Native writers, because it's a touchy subject for us to have a non-Native come in and write about us and tell us how we're supposed to be. But I also, on the other hand, believe that writers should be judged, and filmmakers and artists should be judged on the quality of their creative work and not on their race. So non-natives writing Native stories changes dynamics a little bit, but sometimes it works because we need them as allies, especially when they have the means to propel our stories and our films and to a broader audience. And so I think that even non-native natives that do undertake native-based stories or films, that they be advised to proceed with respect and understand what is being protected and why in native country, and to build a strong relationship with the people you're writing about or you're interviewing. Camaraderie is important. Thus, make acquaintances and friends with the tribe and community, and form an advisory circle. Let them review your work and for facts, and get an endorsement. I've talked to non-natives that haven't done that, and they have a little difficulty with it. And I want native authors, especially the youth. Stories matter and need to be shared because it's important. It's important for us right now.
Those stories do matter. That's what this whole podcast is about, is to tell people stories and to give them a voice. And what was the name of the reservation you grew up on? Tell me again.
The Lower Brule Lakota tribe, it's called Ku Wishasha Oyate, the people. It means, people that live in the lower. We were part of the Rosebud tribe, so that's what it translates as.
So do you still have a lot of family there? Are your parents still there? Do you go back and see your family since you don't live there anymore?
It's really funny because my parents are deceased. My father was probably one of my most powerful influences as an artist and writer and storyteller. He passed away in 2012, and my mother passed away last year. But they have both been probably my foundation and my best support ever. My father he did a lot of different things. He was a pilot, engineer, artist, and he actually had a bronze art foundry that I grew up helping him, learning the lost wax method in bronze sculpture. So, yeah, he was very, very supportive of me as an artist, and that was my foundation. But it's interesting because his style was Frederick Remington, Charles Russell, that old West style of art. And then my influence, on the other hand, was from different ones like T.C. Cannon and Fritz Scholder and different ones that were very abstract. And so I was like balancing both worlds. And today I find that I can put both things into my art with a lot of symbolic type of semi-realism, and it works. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, that is so. I love that your father was such a big influence on your life. And who else inspired your work that you can think of right now?
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Vine Deloria Jr. He was, of course, a Dakota scholar and historian. But the first book that I think I read, Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian Manifesto, that he published in 1969. And oh gosh, it was one of the most substantial books to challenge white America and the stereotyping and mistreatment of natives throughout the history of our country. And I sat up and took notice, and I started following his work. And then I of course, on the art side, was influenced by Oscar Howe, another local artist from Dakota artist from my area. And and then I also, when I was younger, I would go to art shows with my father. And he had friends that also his age that went to art shows. And Richard Riddell, he was self-taught, and my father was self-taught as an artist. And so I would sit and listen to them, and that was inspiring. So my influences, I think, are many, but I think it was my mother who really instilled the love of reading and books in my heart.
Oh, that's another great thing to think about is you've pulled from a lot of different places and you brought it all together into one place for yourself. So you were inspired by your father in the artistic way, and your mother really instilled the love of books into you, so that both of those things kind of came together perfectly for you in your life.
Right. It did. And, leaving home, meaning the reservation, I wanted to see the world. I wanted to create. I wanted to, and I still do. I have that creative spirit that I'm always doing things. I'm never still. I love creating. I love waking up in the morning to see what I could create. But I've had challenges, there for natives, we always have that. I also feel that those challenges have served as a catalyst to propel my personal growth and change my life for the better. And I just can't ever look back and say, I wish this would happened, or that would have happened. I just am so grateful that I made it this far in life, and I hope I can go a long ways further. But, with the challenges, though, I just want to speak to that briefly. The main challenge for me, both as an author, artist, and even scholar, because I have a doctorate degree with a dissertation. And I was always asked to prove my Indianness because people didn't understand the concept of sovereignty and tribal citizenship, and they still don't. There's that lingering perpetration of misinformation and outdated stereotypes that feeds the buckskin and beads mindset and the feathers. And the truth is, as Native Americans, we're not relics of the past, and we're everywhere, vibrant, innovative, visible. And that's what I tell the youth when I talk to them. Look around you. You can see yourself all around you. And we even have a Native American that went into space. How exciting is that? So I think, again, that for all of us Native writers and educators, we need to keep going forward, encouraging one another for the future of our young people. So I think that's a big why I do what I do.
No, that's an excellent why. That's a beautiful why, because you want to be an inspiration. You don't want that inspiration to just fall down and stop. You want to keep it going. So that is great for the young Native Americans, and for them to see you and see you still creating and see you still moving forward and working really hard on their behalf, I think is also a wonderful way for you to inspire youth.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been great talking to you today, Alfreda. I really appreciate your time. And your story is beautiful. And I hope that a lot of people will really pay attention to the things that you said about how you have kept your creativity and kept an open heart to keep things going.
Wopila Tonka, thank you again. I truly appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and have a beautiful day.
Same to you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why? Brought to you by Wyoming Humanities with support from Wyoming Community Foundation and generous supporters like you. To learn more, go to thinkwhy.org, subscribe, and never miss a show.